Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Warm greetings to Casa Llotja de Mar here in Barcelona, an extremely emblematic building. Beside me, I have two great experts. I'd not say in the digital economy, but the digital revolution, the fourth industrial revolution that we are facing today. And today it's not just about economy. Okay, so I have here Mr. Ramo and Ben Youssef. Now, I am speaking about this fourth digital or fourth revolution for a very important reason. And it's because when we speak about economy, we just speak about money. But no, the digital economy or the fourth revolution has far greater impacts than people tend to realize. And more so when we look at the Mediterranean. Yeah? Up to now, many of our countries, what we've been doing is virtually taking what's already been done and slightly adapting them to our current region with their specific idiosyncrasies. But that is not the way to go. Yeah? This revolution means bridging inequality, means greater interaction, it means development, it means knowledge, it means a greater player in not just the global economy, but in today's really volatile environment where we can make a difference. I'm the CEO of Geneva Business School, Spain, and I'm really sad to see brain drain. This brain drain is benefiting other regions and not ours. So today we are going to begin our conversation, this mini debate with two individuals. We're going to look at the social impact of the digital economy. And we're going to look also at the environmental impact of the economy through rural, the integration of new intelligence, artificial intelligence, and other digital tools into the agricultural world. So my big first question to any of you gentlemen would be, what makes the region, the Mediterranean region, so unique? Why aren't we making the most of what we have?
Shall we start?
Yes, please.
So thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer, as Camille, for having invited me to this midweek session. And from now on, I will switch to French. It will be much easier for me to continue our conversation. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the organisers for inviting me to this midweek. I will continue in French. So that's a very broad question. What makes a region important? What's the strength of a region today in our digital world? I use the word numérique in French. And I use that on purpose in French rather than digital. So in my opinion, as a data specialist and data processing specialist, what's the strength of a region? Well, I would say several elements. The most important, talent, human resource and talent of a region. We are fortunate, if we look at the Mediterranean basin, to have, well, the majority of our talent, the young talent, is in the south, and the older or more experienced are in the north. And what makes the strength of a region, like Spain or a country I know very well, Morocco, the strength comes from the interaction and creating the base for interaction helped by the digital platform between the two ecosystems. So the ecosystem of young talent who are they learn quickly, they want to learn, and they become digital experts, combined with the expertise of the older talent, experienced talent in their terrain, and also expertise from the lessons learned and what can be used in technology and data processing.
Speaking about Morocco, you're speaking about a specific country. But in Mediterranean today, we see it is rather fragile. We see that this revolution has not reached each country at the same level. But on the other hand, we are fully aware that this revolution can introduce new skills. It bridges gaps. It introduces new structures. But on the other hand, the digital revolution is not able to happen unless we have good mobile coverage. So how are we going to try and create a more equal region where we don't have to see this brain drain, where we don't have to see this mass migration, people wanting to find a better future? How can we use this in a positive way? What do the governments need to do? And the private industries, because we've got a lot of players and a massive amount of stakeholders.
Donc, vous avez bien...
Indeed, you've mentioned the core of the problem, and that's the coverage in terms of access to knowledge, which nowadays is via internet. Not everyone has access to the internet, but if we look at the experience in the North looked at the internet in a way that cannot be applied or just copied directly in the South. Let me explain. Since the beginning of the internet era until now, we've gone through different stages. Firstly, RTC, ADSL, and then fibre connection. Today, we cannot roll out fibre across the peri-urban territory or those areas that are far from cities. We cannot roll out fibre in that way in the southern countries of the Mediterranean basin. Telecom operators, what they're doing today, they provide 4G communication networks, soon to be 5G, which will bring down the barriers in terms of the digital divide, and it will allow a greater population to have access to digital services. And that's how we will reduce the digital divide between the north and the south of the Mediterranean basin. And we're going to have a better environment for collaboration and cooperation around the services which will be created to meet all needs, whether that be transport needs, improving and enhancing agriculture, smart cities, or governance and e-government programs, open government, to enable citizens to take ownership of local public policies, but also to use commercial services just as if they were connected to services that come from countries that are in the north of the Mediterranean basin.
Definitely the scope of bridging the gap between the north and south of the Mediterranean regions is absolutely important. We have regions which are where we have an industry which is capital intense, and we have regions which is labor intense. Yet those regions which are labor intense, mainly agriculture areas, are absolutely key. And today's volatile situation, we have definitely seen it, where we feel that due to a political situation which is potentially very uncomfortable for all of us, we see people are starving because they don't have access. Now, here I have Mr. Ramon, who's also going to speak and be able to answer a little bit how this digital platform can also help those regions which are more agriculture intense or labor intense. Please, Mr. Ramon.
Well, thank you very much, Nicola, and many thanks to all for your assistance. And now I will speak in Spanish. Bueno, en primer lugar,
Firstly, I would like to thank ESCAME for the invitation. I represent the EEC committee, and I'm a farmer from an area in Aragon, which is the province of Teruel. And you might ask, what is a farmer doing speaking about digitization in such a significant forum like this? Well, actually, because the agrarian sector does not want to miss the digital train. And of course, we need to adapt to this opportunity that science and technologies are offering, this opportunity to have a job which can allow you to have greater profit or earnings and a better life than our parents or our grandparents. Since I come from the EESC, representing farmers, that's who I represent, and as a member of Grupo 3, Group 3, the mandate of the committee, well, what we've given most importance to is digitization, and particularly digitization of rural areas, working on different rulings over this time. One was digitization of the rural Mediterranean areas, and the other would be digitization of SMEs in the Mediterranean area. I think what we've seen that's been so important, not just for citizens and for the European area, the north of the Mediterranean, but also for the south of the Mediterranean, because we have really taken into account the situation of those areas as well. The main conclusions that we have managed to draw from the different conversations that we've had with the committee, the involvement in digital transition crosses almost everything in our life, SMEs, industry, the elderly, youth, and digitization has been accelerated since the pandemic, COVID-19, and we see the effectiveness of this. Well, as we mitigated the COVID-19 crisis, we saw this. And despite how many governments have promoted the effort, we still think that there's unequal efforts, north versus south. So from the EESC, we realize how important it is to offer support infrastructures for these technologies to ensure that they are implemented. Then, Nicola, the question you were asking in the farming sector, when we speak about digitization in the agricultural sector, we're talking about new economic models, we're talking about the collaborative economy, and also investment and research. For example, one of the objectives we have in this sector is to advance or move towards this 4.0 agricultural model. So this will be an agricultural model which can generate a lot of added value, applying different solutions based on data to improve the efficiency of resources, environmental solutions, the supply of fodder for animals, responses to climate change. We're moving towards this model. We must move towards this model or we will be left behind. The agrarian models, the bigger ones, corporate agriculture, may have far easier access to all this technology, access and financing, but also when it comes to family farming, which is my case, yes, it's more difficult for us to obtain the funding to keep all systems up to date, of course we have to look for support from the authorities and from the government on, and also one side of the Mediterranean, supporting this family agriculture on the other side of the Mediterranean. The rural agriculture is the backbone and prevents depopulation of the rural areas. And it also allows us to offer more sustainable farming than other farming models. This is the roadmap here in the European Union. So in the European Union, we're focusing on digitalisation and the Green Pact via two strategies, biodiversity and also farm to table strategy.
Great and amazing, but is it going to arrive on time? And this is a very important question. I've just been checking data and statistics, and every single year we're losing population in the rural areas. The population in the rural areas are getting older. They are not familiar at all with many of the digital technologies. How do we retain that younger, this great talent that we have in the Mediterranean, north, south, and center, to ensure that our countries continue running? Because it doesn't matter how many banks and how many stores we have. Food is one of the most important commodities that we have today. So is it going to arrive on time? Are we being too slow? What needs to be done? And where does the private enterprise come in here to help? Because we are heavily reliant on the local administrations, but local administrations are heavily reliant on the private industry in order to have that capital to reinvest. So this is an open question to both of you. Okay, rural area or other areas which today don't seem extremely attractive to the younger generation. Thank you.
Le dépeuplement rural.
Rural depopulation is a problem which all countries suffer. What we have observed, we've tried to do some experiments in the region where I live, which is the Aquitaine region in the south of France. We've been trying to observe how we can become or keep these rural areas attractive and encourage companies, particularly digital companies, to reinvest in certain territories, to maintain the younger population, the children of these farmers close to the territory, and enable them to develop new services which will be supported, of course, by data processing, connected objects, IT, which are useful for precision agriculture. How can we take ownership of those elements and focus locally with them? And what we imagined were some concepts which, for example, reinvesting let's say post offices that have been abandoned because of the depopulation rurally, schools that have been abandoned because there's no longer children in the village. And what we did was we transformed them just by adding an essential element, which was internet connection, broadband. We've spoken to a telecom operator, I won't mention the name today, but a big telecom operator who helped us to offer connectivity, and we organized with ecosystems of digital companies in France. For example, under the French tech label, we organized sessions where we created pool places. So these places were set up to invite startups with their projects. So we had some success. Of course, the farmers who were the historic owners of certain areas also have children who they've sent to cities to study. And when the children are studying digital studies, there's so many digital studies nowadays, they're delighted to learn that there's premises like that close to their home that is attractive in terms of connectivity, work tools, which lets them work remotely. But today, regardless of the region in the Mediterranean basin, the attractiveness is about broadband. You cannot be an attractive place if you don't offer users access to connectivity as if they were in an urban centre, and to offer them the same tools as if they were in a big company, let's say in a fancy building in Paris or an industrial area here in Barcelona. People work remotely. All the IT tools are available. The only thing that's missing is the connectivity to the network and the material equipment to access the information system quickly, but also securely, because we cannot speak about sharing information or creating new services around agriculture and livestock rearing if data is vulnerable. We have to think that these are new ways of industry. You called it Industry 4.0. We're connecting to information. And if there are attacks on these IT systems, if measures are corrupted or modified, that could have an important impact on the local agricultural industry. So that's one option. It's not the only option. I think there's probably other institutions that work on these issues as well. And maybe we need to ask the question about attractiveness. Cities today are overpopulated. We've seen populations that are moving to the suburbs. People no longer want to spend 2 hours in their car to commute to the office. Most work nowadays can be done, well, the COVID health crisis revealed for many professions, because of the COVID crisis, they learned that they can work remotely. They can continue to provide services remotely. So why not capitalize on that learning and extend that today to other mechanisms which will resolve this rural depopulation?
Sí, a ver, estoy.
I fully agree with what my colleague just said. Why do we have this brain drain, particularly young people in rural areas, but not just from agriculture, many other sectors? Why don't they set up SMEs in the rural environment? Mainly because we haven't been able to bridge this digital divide, because we've been unable to access internet, maybe with significant fiber coverage in many areas, which becomes a limitation. You're not able to set up your company. So why are we sharing these ideas during this wonderful event talking about digitization? Well, right now I have a fully digitized farm, and via my mobile phone I can check exactly how things are on the farm. And that's thanks to the different authorities, local councils, provincial areas, or funds coming from Next Generation. I live in a village where there are only 27 inhabitants, and the depopulation happened because there were no opportunities for young people. Now we're going to try and repopulate because we can start to have this opportunity and this connection to the outside world, which we haven't had until now. Being able to focus on agriculture 365 days a year, but we can also share our experiences in different fora, like here, or I can go with my partner, my family, on vacation to the beach for a week, which until now was impossible. That's been a major challenge, but I would also like to say there are many cases and examples. I can mention recent examples from the wine sector, thanks to efforts made in this sector. Well, the objective was informing all customers via a QR code on the wine label to show the traceability of the wine bottle. And the goal there is to offer added value in the sale of that wine, not just locally, but also being able to export it to third countries. And this transformation, technologically and digitally, has already created new technologies based on blockchain, big data, or artificial intelligence, use of bots, drones, Internet of Things. Practically, well, we have such a variety of things now farmers are using. What we had needed for that has been training, not just young people, but also training and learning from the older people. And this is a major challenge. In rural areas, a very high percentage of people who live there are older people. And when I say older people, I'm not talking about 50-year-olds like we maybe think, but 60 or 70-year-olds who find it very difficult to access all of this technology. But gradually, and with this effort to provide information and connection by the authorities, we're managing to provide access directly or indirectly. What do we need in rural areas? We need these areas to be as attractive to live in as a big city like Barcelona. They need to offer medical services which are perfect and connected digitally, so that you can issue an electronic prescription and not have to do that by hand, have access to your studies, not have to use books but study via tablet like you would in a big city. And when I want to change my lifestyle or consider setting up my own rural company, I should have this window to the outside open to me, which isn't always the case in all areas. So one of the major challenges that we have right now, and we need to work on, is reduce this digital divide, overcome this difficulty to access new technologies in the rural area. In the southern areas of the Mediterranean, we're making progress. We've made progress in the northern areas of the Mediterranean. There's still a lot to be done in the southern Mediterranean. And in forums like this, Meda Week, where we hear about the different Mediterranean countries, we have to really put our finger on where we need to strengthen digitization in the south of the Mediterranean.
Again, there is this disparity or disagreement between one region and another, one country and another. I'm just looking at data from GSMA, and 94% of the disconnectivity of the world's unconnected population is rural areas. And if we look at it again from a global perspective, it mainly affects women. Yeah. So I do agree that we need to look at a more collaborative economy, a collaborative approach, not just administrations, but also make it attractive. Yeah, digital economy is great, digitalisation is great, but infrastructures, access, highways, etc. are absolutely key. And also make it attractive for people, companies to stay or build, and also the quality of life where people can enjoy that quality of life, but also have access to what many people love in the big cities, which is gastronomy, culture, etc. I think we could be speaking here for hours. because I know that there's you have many interesting stories of great talents that have done great things, not by reinventing, but by looking at understanding what this market, this region needs because of the cultural idiosyncrasies. And I'm afraid that we never got to speak about that. And that's another important thing when we're speaking about the digital economy. Understand not everything is adaptable, not everything can be used. We need to understand the social impact of a lot of things that today in other countries are automated and digitalized. Here in the Mediterranean region have a social component. So let's change, let's bring in, we have the talent, let them build and commercialize instead of us bringing in and adapting what has been done elsewhere. That is a way of generating wealth, using our talent, reducing brain drain, and us becoming a wealthier region. A lot. And again, bridging that gap of inequality, which is today one of our biggest concerns. So thank you very much. Now to you both. Now, if anybody has any questions that you'd like to raise to both of our gentlemen specialists here today, please go ahead.
We're not hearing the speaker's question in the translation booths.
So.
Yes, I'd like to concur with what everybody has said. But what strikes me most is the negativity you are showing against brain drain. No. It's brain drain can be managed in the way that, of course, you first offer or bring in investments so that things will happen in your country. So your bright students can actually thrive in your own country. But if this doesn't happen, they're going to look elsewhere. Now, when they look elsewhere, and this happened in Malta when we joined EU, we were so worried, we were so scared. All the papers talked about brain drain, this is going to happen. But what happened was that these students of ours who were bright and good technicians and they were into technology really, and they had already some successes, they went abroad. But after a number of years, they came back. They came back with the know-how and built their own business in their own country. So brain drain can reverse and be positive. So this is the way we can manage it better.
I fully agree with you, and I don't want to make it look negative. I'm just using statistics that we have had over a long period of time. And I love the mobility of young men and women going abroad, gaining experience, and then taking it back to their own countries. But unfortunately, right now, today, there's a high level of these young men that don't return. And wouldn't it be lovely, a better place if we as nations were able to retain a lot of these young men and women who go to third countries to find a job and unfortunately live under the umbrella of poverty, who went in, and this is where I'm trying to get to, not trying to discriminate, not trying to make it look negative, but the reality is that we have a lot of people when we should be giving them, building as schools, as industries, as governments, the platforms so that if they don't want to leave, they don't have to leave. And it's when they have no other alternative but to leave. That is when it becomes a tragedy. And they get out, they are paperless, their knowledge is not being able to share, they cannot contribute. So it's that side of the picture that we're looking at. So if you'd like to.
Sí. A ver, yo creo que no, que tampoco.
I don't think we need to have a pessimistic message or something negative around brain drain. It's real, it's clear. In Spain, this is one of the countries of the European Union with the greatest brain drain. But because they're going to look for a professional opportunity in other countries in the European Union, outside of the European Union, because they can receive a higher salary than any company in Spain. That's real, it's clear. Of course, there's work to be done there, particularly from the different authorities, to recover these young people, doctors, nurses, engineers who go and look for a better opportunity outside of Spain. But when I was talking about brain drain, I was talking about the rural areas because they don't have access to connectivity which other areas offer, but not just from an agricultural point of view. You know, maybe in my health centre in my village, for 1 year, we did not have an ear, nose and throat specialist for a year because no doctor wanted to go and work in the rural area. So in order to attract these people to the rural areas, doctors, nurses, engineers, entrepreneurs and self-employed people, we have to adapt this or offer the rural area with the same means as a big city. In my village, 27 people have had to go 150 kilometers away to Zaragoza or to Teruel to make their living. Now, thanks to the work that we've done from the European institutions, work that's been done by the different bodies, we've managed to offer fast internet connection in the rural areas. And this is so important to develop not just agricultural work, but also work in other sectors. If we're able to achieve that in the rural areas, then we should have no doubt that young people will come back and live in the villages in similar conditions to what they would have in cities. And 3 days ago, we had the International Day of Rural Pride to claim the importance of maintaining the rural living alive. And I think that digitization, Internet of Things, is really essential to make this happen.
Give you the word. I'd like to just explain something. I also have land. I'm a farmer, but orange groves, apart from being the CEO for a business school, which I absolutely love. I run it from an organic and aspect. By law in Europe, and especially in Spain, you need to have a license to handle pesticides and chemicals. And I was the only woman there doing the exam. And when I finished the exam, I had to sit down and write the exam, the questions of the exam, for 32 people, men, in the age of 70, because none of the young people wanted to stay. And I'm not as good as him. I have to use radio internet because I don't have any other means. And I'm speaking of Spain and a developed nation. So and this is why I'm saying 94% of the population, the disconnectivity is rural, and that is a brain drain. When we speak about brain drain, it doesn't mean going to other countries. It also means internally. This displacement can really damage some of our great infrastructures. What I said at the beginning is food and farming are absolutely critical and crucial in today's world.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oui, si je peux.
If I could come back to that comment, brain drain, well, I've tried to analyze that through the lens, exclusively through a digital lens, try to focus on that. I grew up in a country where all children were told, when you go to school, you have to find knowledge, even if you have to go to China. It was an example that was shared in Moroccan families. And what they mean is Children need to be motivated, curious, and go and find knowledge wherever it is. I went and found knowledge in France, not so far, not China. And what we have example with brain drain, we speak about the brain drain of Moroccans towards other countries. But what we need to realize today is that with connectivity globally and with interaction around all the world, we can have startups. I worked with a startup based in Dubai, and we provided services around the world. And in our company, there are people who work from Nigeria, not from Lagos, but from a small village next to Lagos, and some close to Arba in Harada, and some engineers in France, in the Basque Country, other engineers in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, and in Egypt. And all these people at some point maybe had the temptation to leave, to go and look for work elsewhere. But now with digital, we have global opportunities. So you can work. Now we shouldn't use that as a reason to leave a country. Like today, when we send someone to a country, the social structure doesn't work for the individual because they don't necessarily pay the costs for the country in the country of residence, because we don't have the structure that allows for these sort of things. Maybe if the public powers could take on that subject and build instruments that would allow companies to globalize, not about sending workers to different countries, but really allow them to use their knowledge from their point of residence, because people today want to stay in comfortable places. They want to live along by the sea, in the countryside, but you must ensure there's connectivity and also offer them the full package, the administrative package that will allow an employer to pay the taxes, to pay social contributions, which enable the public institution to work. So I think that there's a gap at the moment. There's a lot of unknown. Companies do what they can to find out about the legislation for, well, if we're in Dubai, for example, we ensure that we pay the taxes we should in Dubai, for example, or in the countries where we have people on contracts, if an instrument exists. But if there's no cooperation structure in place to enable these employees to work in good conditions and be fully covered in terms of health insurance, in terms of different social cover, that can be a problem. But I think that would encourage some to migrate to countries where that's possible. But it's the departure country to do that piece of work, maybe vote new laws and create the environment that enables people to work, to have a brain drain that's not a physical brain drain, but rather a virtual brain drain. Nothing prevents people from working remotely when we're talking about digital jobs. Of course, there's some countries that do dumping in terms of service providers. You just have to go to ask on social media to get developers in different technologies. You have a disparity of rates that are paid. Of course, that should be regulated. It should be controlled and managed by state instruments. Companies will conform with what is established. Thank
Mr. Ben Youssef, Mr. Lamel, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today and listening, and for you, those who are online, also thank you very much. Thank you.
Merci. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, José.